From the General Assembly at the United Nations, December 2nd, 1988, the Ambassador of Zimbabwe.
Public television channel 13 has introduced a weekly program called South Africa Now, which is worthy of our attention.
Global Vision presents the TV news magazine of Southern Africa.
The Protection of Information Act threatens journalists with jail.
It's got nothing to do with government policy. It's got nothing to do with apartheid or anything like that.
Because it is important that people know what is happening.
South Africa Now. This week reporting these stories.
Get up, stand up. Don't give up. Louder!
Rock and roll on the front line in Southern Africa. A South Africa Now exclusive. Amnesty International's Human Rights Now tour in Zimbabwe.
They'd expected kind of something which they'd been fed for over the last 20 years or so, and to come and see something else, I think, opened their eyes a little. Hopefully, that's what I've been told.
Celebration in Soweto. We have the pictures from inside South Africa of freed political prisoners. Harry Gwala of the ANC, Zephania Mothopeng of the PAC, and newspaper editor Zwelakhe Sisulu.
He is released into a kind of restriction which will make it impossible for him to be what the people will want him to be.
These stories and more on South Africa Now with hosts Fana, Kekana, and Carolyn, Craven.
Sanibonani. 8 more political prisoners were released the first week in December, most notably Zwelakhe Sisulu, the editor of The New Nation, who had been detained without trial for 2 years. Carolyn Craven has more.
Sisulu's family and friends were on hand to greet him, as was the whole press corps. But the terms of Sisulu's release prevent him from being interviewed or being in the same room as the press. Here he is actually leaving his own press conference after learning he has been muzzled, or as his lawyer explained, put under a form of house arrest.
Well, it seems that he can virtually do nothing. He is imprisoned in his own house.
Mary Burton, president of Black Sash, a protest organization that counsels political detainees, told us the terms of Sisulu's release.
He is released into a kind of restriction which will make it impossible for him to be what the people will want him to be. He's not allowed to return to his job as editor of The New Nation. He's not allowed to write anything for publication. He's restricted from taking any part in any activity organized by a long list of organizations, including the UDF and the South African Council of Churches and educational organizations. He has to report to the police station twice a day. He is prevented from being at meetings where the government is criticized. He may not speak to any group or larger than, I think it's a number of 10 persons.
The 2 aging and ill political prisoners released in late November made their first public appearances. And we have pictures and statements of them and their supporters.
It's just like a dream.
Friends and family danced outside the home of 69-year-old Harry Gwala, an ANC stalwart and trade unionist who was released after serving 20 years. He is suffering from a terminal illness.
In the process of struggle, one should expect to undergo inconveniences, so there's no need for one to be angry. I was dumbfounded, you know. I didn't know whether to believe or not to believe, but there was just that void in me, as I would put it that way. It was not until very late that I realized that they were serious and I was going out.
There was also exuberance at a press conference for the 75-year-old leader of the Pan-Africanist Congress, Zephania Mothopeng.
Fellow comrades, ladies and gentlemen of the media, thank you for joining me this afternoon. I hope that through you I will be able to convey my greetings and pass a message of goodwill to all comrades and people of Azania and all over the world. I was surprised by my sudden release from prison on Saturday, but I am also very delighted to be out of prison.
At the United Nations, the chairman of the Special Committee Against Apartheid opened the debate on apartheid with a strong condemnation of Western countries with economic links with South Africa. Nigerian Ambassador Joseph Garba.
The Special Committee is particularly concerned and regrets deeply that the United Kingdom, the United States, and the Federal Republic of Germany continue to be major economic partners of South Africa. It is further concerned that the lifeline of the South African economy, i.e., the short-term credit, is being provided mainly by the United Kingdom, the Federal Republic of Germany, and Switzerland.
The peace agreement that calls for the independence of Namibia and the withdrawal of Cuban troops from Angola was not signed as many hoped it would be in Brazzaville on December 5th. South Africa walked out, raising new objections to the way the Cuban withdrawal was to be verified. And according to South African Foreign Minister Pick Boda, South Africa must agree to its terms or there is no deal.
Important work and discussions are continuing in order to establish a verification mechanism acceptable to all parties, including South Africa. I want to stress this, acceptable to all parties, including South Africa.
Meanwhile, The Guardian in England reports that South African-backed UNITA troops are being withdrawn into neighboring Namibia. We'll have more on Namibian developments next week.
And finally, in the news, the African National Congress announced the death of its Foreign Affairs Secretary and longtime UN representative, Johnny Makatini. He was ill and died in Lusaka, Zambia. Makatini spoke with South Africa Now on his last visit to New York.
Those who accuse us of being communist inclined or terroristic are in fact echoing the Pretoria propaganda. Let's look at what South Africa means by communism. According to the South African laws, anybody who strives for social, political, or economic change is a communist. So even a body like the United Nations, according to the South Africans, is a communist-inclined organization. And then, of course, I must also say that for us, it's not new. All authentic liberation movements, once they become effective, they've always been called communist-inclined in an attempt to discredit and isolate such movements.
You are watching South Africa Now, the only news magazine of its type in the world. In the weeks ahead, we'll have another television exclusive, a song provided to us by the Irish band U2 from their new concert film, Silver and Gold.
It's a song written about a man in a shanty town outside of Johannesburg. A man who's sick of looking down the barrel of white South Africa. A man who is at the point where he is ready to take up arms against his oppressor. A man who has lost faith in the peacemakers of the West.
News coverage of South Africa can reflect limited perspectives because white journalists often lack access to the African townships. Our background report takes a look at some unusual black reporters who are the subjects of Dateline Soweto, a new book by New Yorker writer Bill Finnegan.
Black reporters play a really critical role in this ragged, slow-motion South African revolution. Their beat is the war zone, as it were, the townships and the Bantustans. White reporters really can't cover the fighting, between security forces and activists or whomever. They don't speak the 6 or 7 languages that are essential for getting around, especially around Johannesburg. They don't know, black politics, black society, the complexities, especially of township geography. So black reporters end up being often the only accurate source of news about what's going on in the townships.
John Gwala of the Johannesburg Star was one of the reporters Finnegan followed while covering the townships.
He was a really, really good reporter, brave and relentless and quite creative in his approach to a story. good at defying his editors. That's a crucial virtue in his situation. He'd been beat up and shot, and you know, he'd suffered the pains of that job.
Mono Badela, seen here in this Afrovision story, is another journalist who travels the dusty township roads to tell the stories of the majority of South Africans who would remain largely voiceless in the white-owned press. Another reporter, Mkhonto Mkhondo, agrees that covering the townships is difficult.
I would say that I as a black person, I have better access to some of the stories that maybe white journalists might not actually be able to get. And the difficulty is trying to convince my editor that the story is good.
It's really tricky, you know, how to write about an often chaotic situation, often mob violence, and for a white-owned, often white-read, white-edited newspaper in a way that doesn't imply disapproval, you know, of the forces of lawlessness.
Having observed how black reporters cover the townships, Finnegan concludes.
South Africa is just set up in such a way that foreign journalists work out of the white cities, live in the white cities, and have to make a big effort to sort of get over to the other side, if you can speak very generally of two sides in South Africa, and of course that's an oversimplification. Still, the majority point of view, you know, where most people are living, in the townships, in the Bantustans, in the rural areas, is very little conveyed.
The Weekly Mail, back on the stands after a month's suspension, carries much of the stories others don't. And it also has this popular feature, a regular cartoon from the acid pen of South Africa's Derek Bauer.
The conflict situation gives scope for a lot of satirical comment. A number of my cartoons actually are based on original quotes from people in the government. Like P.W. Botha once made a statement to the effect of, there are no political prisoners in South Africa, which I just think is so absurd that it begs a cartoon.
Botha offered more material at the opening of Parliament last year when he questioned why so many people were calling for the release of Nelson Mandela when other political prisoners were still behind bars.
Subsequent to that statement, Sharansky and Sakharov have been released, and Du Toit has been released. And Nelson Mandela, still being in prison, begged the cartoon. It was a cartoon waiting to happen. P.W. Botha is always threatening everyone. You know, in South Africa, we don't have the same sort of political structuring as you have here. In South Africa, they choose a president, I believe, in terms of how mean he is. The meanest guy becomes president. The hard ass becomes president in South Africa. Desmond Tutu really pisses him off because Desmond Tutu doesn't keep quiet. He's always saying the wrong thing at the wrong time. He's got a very high profile in the media. Not so much in South Africa because the media is controlled by the government. But I mean in the world media, Desmond Tutu is very high profile. And I think he gets a lot more opportunity to say what he wants to say than P.W. Botha would ever get.
This is the 40th anniversary of this document, the UN's Declaration of Human Rights. To mobilize support for its principles, Amnesty International organized some leading rock and rollers to tour the world. One of the most dramatic stops was in Zimbabwe, a frontline state in Southern Africa. Thanks to the Reebok Human Rights Foundation, we have this exclusive report. Independence Day 1980. The British flag gives way to an independent Zimbabwe. Leading the celebration, Jamaica's Bob Marley.
Every man got the right to decide his own destiny. And if this judgment here, get up, stand up, get up, stand up. Stand up for your rights. Stand up for your rights.
In 1988, Bob Marley's music again proclaimed the message of human rights, as sung by some of the biggest rock and roll stars in the world.
Stand up for your rights. Get up, stand up, get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight. Don't give up. Most people say, great God will come from the sky, take away everything and make everybody be high. But if you know what life is worth, you will look to yours on earth. And now you see the light. Stand up for your right. Get up, stand up. Get up, stand up. Stand up for your right. Stand up for your right. Get up, stand up. Get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight. Get up, stand up. Stand up for your right. Get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight. Well, we're sick and tired of the schism game. Dying, go to heaven in Jesus' name. Cause we know and we understand that a mighty God is a living man. He's so big to so time.
We are celebrating the unity of art and history. Welcome to Zimbabwe.
I'm very pleased to be here in Africa, particularly in Zimbabwe, where you have shown the world an example of victory over oppression, and I hope that will help speed about change in South Africa and get rid of the filthy apartheid system once and for all. Thank you.
I'd like to go to and play in South Africa, but not when apartheid exists. I'd like to be invited by the South African people as a whole.
The tour does deal with specifics in the sense that we're asking individuals to take responsibility for themselves and for the world that they live in. I find the system of apartheid abhorrent. I think it's simply a form of modern-day slavery. You know, anything less than full participation of all the people in the government and in the sharing of the wealth of the country is a crime.
Thousands of white South Africans crossed the border to see the show, and for many, to see a multiracial society for the first time.
They'd expected kind of something which they'd been fed for over the last 20 years or so, and to come and see something else, I think, open their eyes a little. Hopefully, that's what I've been told.
South Africa should be looking at countries like this. You see that, people of all races can live together in peace and harmony, no sweat.
We have a great artist like Springsteen coming down to Zimbabwe. It's really great. It shows some sense of oneness, in the world. Particularly when for such a noble cause like human rights. So I think it's very wonderful. Yes. I think I wish if the spirit, of such universal spirit could continue. So you can even see people are mixing regardless of color or race or whatever it is.
Backstage, many of the musicians discuss very personal issues of identity.
It's an incredible shot in the arm to come here and to see, so many black people, to see like the majority of people, black people doing all different kinds of things, not just black people doing this job and that job, but black people doing that job and being the president. It's an incredible, it's like we all need to have something like that to look to.
Today was the first time I cried at a rock and roll concert that I can remember, to see the sea of darkness. It was just so wonderful to know that you're part of something that has been here before time. It's just blackness has been. It all came from the dark. As life as we know it now, the rhythms, music. It all started here. And then to be a part of it, coming back. Coming here, I say coming back because I feel like I did come from here, although this is the first time in this physical life that I have been here. But it's part of every black man's culture, every black man's heritage,
As black people that go back to Africa, it's like going home, but I really feel it's the same for everybody. I think this is like the womb of the planet, the jungles and the rivers. And for me, it seems like coming home, I think we all come from this.
Well, not many people know what you know, though. What you're just saying, man. Do you know how many? You can go to jail for saying that. What you just said.
I'd like to introduce Ilonga and Comrade Jinx.
Artists like Bruce Springsteen shared the stage with one of Zimbabwe's hottest groups.
I like to believe that music can change people's minds and attitudes and feelings about themselves, about their own humanity.
This is for Stephen Biko.
Ultimately, Peter Gabriel was the artist to give the moment its meaning, to bring home the message of human rights now.
A lot of people here from South Africa. We ask you to fight for that change from inside. This man wanted to fight for his rights without violence. He was tortured, beaten, and killed. September 77, Port Elizabeth, weather fine. It was business as usual in police room 619. Oh, because, oh, because. Yilamaja, the man is dead. The man is dead. Singing along, but I want you
Transcripts are now available for $3. If you want an educational resource list or to share your comments, send a stamped self-addressed envelope to South Africa Now, the Africa Fund, 198 Broadway, New York, New York, 10038. South Africa Now is produced in association with the Africa Fund.